Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to a new live event with CareerFoundry. We're going to give it a moment before starting with the presentation so more people can join us and get settled. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Laura, head of social here at CareerFoundry, and today I have the great pleasure of welcoming back Emerson to the events channel to tell us how to become a UX writer. While people are joining, please let us know where you're watching from and why you're interested in a career change into UX in the chat on the right-hand side. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so feel free to drop any comments you'd like to share with us. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce you to Career Foundry. Career Foundry is the online school for your career change into tech. We guide you from complete beginner to job-ready professional in UX and UI design and help you land your very first job in the field. We're not your traditional online school. However, our programs are so flexible that you don't need to quit your job to change your career. You get regular one-on-one mentorships from not one but two industry experts, and if you don't land a job within 180 days of graduation, we refund your tuition. That's your job guarantee. Now, I'll share a few of our house rules before we begin. The webinar will be recorded and we'll send the recording out in the next few days via email. If you have any questions for Emerson, please drop them in the chat in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side, and we'll answer them during the Q&A. If you have any questions about Career Foundry's programs, please book a call with one of our program advisors. They will answer all of your questions and provide you with more information. And with that, let's get started. I'll disappear into the background and be back for the Q&A with the presentation. After the presentation, thank you so much for joining us today. And Emerson, the floor is now yours.
Okay, I did unmute the mic. All right, there was a little delay. I wasn't sure if I got it.
Good to go.
Hey, y'all, how you doing? I'm glad you're all here. I'm excited about, sharing some information and ideas with you today. And keep dropping in where you're from. This is always interesting for me to see. Very cool. Some of you are dropping in like background stuff. We're going to talk about this some today. So we're going to talk about how to become a UX writer. I'm going to do a brief intro of myself, and I'm going to share a little bit about how I got into UX writing, because it was not a straight path. It was not, there's nothing simple about it. Very colorful CV that I have. And I think maybe some of you might relate. So, zip forward here. So I'm Emerson. My pronouns are he or they. I'm a cat dad. Clementine, I've closed her out of the living room this time because she has a tendency of interrupting when I'm having conversations with other people. But she is quite adorable, as you can see. She only just recently made her LinkedIn and professional debut. So I'm obsessed with UX writing, with inclusive design, accessibility. I'm a UX writer at HelloFresh, and excited to be here with all of you. So I want to give you a little background or a little idea of what my professional history is. So I'll let you just take a look at these bullet points for a second. I'm going to run through it. As I said, it's a colorful CV. It was a long and meandering road. My very first job in my hometown, tiny little town, I was a Subway sandwich artist. This was back in the day. I don't know if y'all remember Jared. It was back in the day when Jared was in all of the promotional materials and everything. I worked in coffee shops, restaurants, movie theaters, art galleries, worked in a life insurance customer service call center. That was something. Worked as a K-12 substitute teacher, and then I went into teaching English as a second language. I went into teaching writing and research to first-year college students and doing a lot of academic and creative writing. And finally, I decided I wanted to move to Berlin, so I made the leap into tech through content marketing at CareerFoundry, actually. So CareerFoundry has a special place in my heart. And then I finally made the shift to UX writing. Maybe we get to it tonight sometime. I don't want to spend too much time talking about my stuff, but like how I made that discovery was a very gradual process. When I found out UX writing was a thing, I thought, okay, well, I'm already doing the writing thing, right? So like, how do I do the UX thing? Got a UX design certification. And when I did this, I realized that in all of these jobs, and we're going to circle back to this later, where I'll talk about transferable skills, But as I looked back at every single one of these jobs, I realized I had been doing UX the whole time. It's been a steady thread throughout the process. And so if you're making a career change from what feels like a very unrelated background or a very colorful background, I'm poster child for the colorful CV, and I know that it can be done. So yeah, ready to answer questions about that later as well. So that's me. Now, here's what we'll be talking about today, tonight, this morning, wherever you are. Very briefly, just in case there are people who are brand new to it, we're going to cover very briefly what is UX and other UX career paths. Then we'll dig very briefly again into what is UX writing. Then we'll start getting into some of the meats of it and talking about what does a UX writer do, what is the core skill set, and then how to look more at your skills compared to this skill set and find where your growing edge is. And I'm going to share with you something I have not shared with other people before, so you're the lucky ones. I'm going to share with you an adapted version of my own skills inventory tracker that I hope will be useful to you. At the very least, there's some resources in there that I think you'll find helpful. And then we're going to talk about how to land the job. It's going to feel like quite the information dump. So I'm going to try and stop for questions along the way. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so definitely drop things into the Q&A as we're going. And when I finish kind of one little section, I'm gonna check for questions there and make sure we get the relevant ones for that. And yeah, we'll go from there. Before I dive in, or maybe, no, let's do this. Let's do this right now. So I showed you my background. So if you can, if you're able to, take a piece of paper and a pen, or take out an electronic note, whatever you do, or somehow jot down. Think about your very first job. And if you also want to drop it in the chat, that would be fine with me. Your very first job. Write that down or jot it down. Drop it in the chat. I'm going to give you a second to do that. Now think about your current situation, whether you have a job or not, whether you're job hunting, whether you're a freelancer, fully employed, you love your job, you're looking to upskill, whatever it might be, okay? Awesome, jobs are coming in. This makes me unreasonably happy. Okay, I'm gonna see what we have here. Okay, wait staff. Oh my gosh, online sales for an addiction recovery-based gift shop. God, that sounds interesting. All right, barman, golf lesson assistant. There's like, y'all are from, this is like, oh my gosh. Okay. Now think about your most recent, like where you are right now, what you're doing. If you want to drop that in the chat, you can, or you can just write it down. Okay. And while you do that, I'm going to keep looking. We've got ice cream shop, barista. Oh, I've done my barista time, pulling shots. Any movie theater people experience shoveling popcorn? I did that for a while. I learned more from that job than I have learned from many of my other jobs. It was very interesting. All right, now think about the things that you did in between. All right, now for some of you, there might not be many things. For some of you, there's going to be a whole lot of things. All right, think of the big ones that really stand out, where they were really hard, or they were really rewarding, or that you really grew from. All right. And if you have a few more of those bullet points you can put in between or list with that, just jot those down really quickly. We're going to come back to this later. All right. Data capture. Jacqueline, that sounds cool. Huh. An editor for finance politics. Wow. Y'all are cool. Awesome. English teacher and content marketing writer. Hey, y'all. That's my background. Right, associate content designer. Awesome. Okay, this is so cool. Thank you all for sharing this. I really appreciate it. Now let's move forward. We're going to talk a little bit, very briefly, like I said, what is UX, just in case. UX is an acronym, stands for user experience. Very broad term. It defines how people interact with products, both in the physical and digital world. Where we are right now in this context, we're talking about digital products like phone apps, mobile apps, and websites, right? And UX career paths in tech all revolve around looking at those experiences that people have with these products and finding ways to make those experiences work better for the people who are engaging with them, right? That's what UX is all about. Now, there are a lot of career paths you can take in UX. It feels like there's just more and more every time I turn around. But it's pretty cool because it's a very rich discipline. There's a lot of opportunity to master some basics and then shoot off in any old direction you want to, wherever your interests, wherever your background, whatever is going to be the most interesting to you. There's a lot of directions you can go. But all of these UX career paths revolve around either this entire design thinking process, which I've outlined at the top of this slide, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. I'm not going to go into this right now because that will take too much time. There are a lot of resources on the CareerFoundry blog. Some of them I wrote. So check those out, okay? Most UX or all UX related disciplines are going to involve this process or some part of it in some way, shape, or form. It might not be called that, but if these things are not involved in the process, it's not UX. Okay. These things are all important. They connect you with your users' needs. They connect you with the pain points that your users are experiencing, and they help you to find ways to actually solve those problems in delightful ways. So I'm just going to go briefly over these because you can also explore, like I said, more on the CareerFoundry blog. UX design is the big one. This one, UX designers focus a lot on the flow of the experience and how users are going to get from point A to point B to point C, etc. Okay. UX research focuses on what are users experiencing specifically along that journey through that flow, and what are the pain points, what are the problems that they're facing, digging into that. UX writing focuses on this whole UX thing, the flow from beginning to end, but looks at the words and how the information on the screen, and in the case of accessibility and people using assistive tech behind the screen, it looks at how this information is guiding users through the conversation with the app or the website. And that is what we're going to talk about next. So UX writing is the process of creating a conversation with users that is so intuitive, it flows so naturally that they barely notice it's happening. There might be moments that stand out that's like, oh my gosh, that was delightful that they said this particular little thing, or, there might be those kinds of moments, but it's so good that it's just, they don't notice it. That's the thing with really good design, is often the thing that we notice the least because it's doing its job and letting us do what we are there to accomplish with that app or that website. So UX writing focuses on exactly what UX focuses on, with a specific intention towards creating content that is clear and concise. So you're thinking about reading level, you're thinking about character counts. It really focuses on what I think of as an economy of words. So like my grad studies, I studied, part of what I studied was poetry. And it's a similar thing where if you're writing a poem and you're kind of working in this poetic form, you're going to have to cut out a lot of the words that aren't going to fit that form, right? And when you have an economy of words, when you have to be more focused on getting the right words, the more precise words, you really get in there with the exact things that they describe that exact idea really specifically. And so that's what you're aiming for. Also aiming for consistent content from a technical and editorial standpoint, but also through tone of voice. I'll note here that it's different. It's different than like brand. So brand focuses on tone of voice, definitely. It tends to be in marketing, especially a little bit more personality driven than in UX writing, where there's personality, but not at the expense of usability. And so that's important. And then when you can, you're creating content that is also delightful. And I'll show you, it might be next actually. Yeah, there it is. This is some content I find delightful. So Headspace is one of my favorite apps. And everything they do, almost everything they do makes me very, very happy. But these are some examples of UX writing. So you have push notifications, you have drawers, you have CTAs down here with the share button, the get some headspace, learn more, etc. You have pop-ups, and you have whole information flows like this on the very far right side. So these are examples of UX writing. I'm going to pause in just a second to check questions, but yeah, I also love the Headspace app design. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Now, the thing to remember as you look at examples of UX writing is that these are just the outcome of a much larger process, a much longer process. That involves a lot of other steps, deliverables, collaboration with different people, sometimes negotiating things. It's a much longer process. This is just a very simple, very cute outcome, right? I think a lot of people, when they get interested in UX writing, they're focusing a lot on this outcome. Like, oh, I get to write cute copy, And yeah, sometimes that is the job, but it's a fraction of it. So there's a lot more to it. And we're going to dig into that. Okay, that was like a lot of blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to stop for a second, drink some tea, and check questions. Okay, I don't see any in the Q&A yet. So if you have one, drop it in there about anything I've said so far. If you want to drop it into the chat, I'm watching it right now. So pressing questions before we move on. You just got like the rapid intro to UX writing. I hope you're all doing okay. Give it another second. Ooh, we got Sid in there with a Telegram group. Nice. Excellent. How does data play a role in UX writing? Is it similar to UX design? I'd say it's similar to UX design. Data should inform a lot of it, especially from UX research. It does play a role. Yeah, absolutely. Thinking through research as you're preparing to write, through copy testing, things like this. Data is definitely a part of it. My favorite part of the UX writing process, oh no. I don't know if I can answer that. I'm going to think about that one. Let me see. That is a good one, Eileen. In terms of UX writing and content writing, what is the difference in job scope? In job scope, I think that it depends on content writing in which capacity. Like for me, writing content in content marketing before, the difference was like, it's a totally different side of the company that I would work in. So content writing, I was working within marketing. And as a UX writer, I'm working within product. And so the people I'm collaborating with it's a very different set of people. And so I would say it's quite different. Also, the emphasis on writing, that's much smaller bits of writing that I'm doing now. And there's a lot more of other things we'll get into, research, collaborations, conversations, lots of other stuff. So yeah, my favorite part of the UX writing process, I think I'm ready to answer this, Eileen. Oh, am I? Oh dear. My favorite part of the UX writing process is when it works. It's like, it's a very intense and rigorous and like sometimes painful process, just like writing is painful. It takes a lot of work. UX writing is no exception. It takes work. And when it works, like I did this thing, collaborated with a whole lot of other people. We fixed some copy in it. I can't give you all the information on it, but the improvements, like on the metrics we had, it was just like improvements of like these massive percentages that I was like, this is working better for people. And it's amazing. It's amazing when that happens. So yeah. All right, check the questions again, and we're going to move on. Best way to build a portfolio to start out, Rebecca, we're going to get to that. And there's some resources in the inventory tracker, the skills inventory tracker that I'll share with you. Okay. So let's move on. So what does a UX writer actually do? Here's a list. It's a lot of words on the screen. So take your time and look at that. I'll go through a little slowly. Depending on the scope, the size of the company you're in and how it's structured, there's more or less user research, but you're always engaging with user research, doing conversation mining, mapping, sketching, things like this. You're constantly seeking to understand user problems, design constraints, business goals, writing to bring all of those together. You are in that, I would say. So as your UX writers work at this intersection, right? You're looking at the visual design. You're looking at what your users need. You're looking at what your designers are working with and what their goals are. And you're looking at, okay, what is What does the business need to accomplish here? You're writing to bring all of those together. And what is easiest to lose track of in that is your users. And it is so important to like constantly bring that back and say, but what do our users need? What do our users need? What do our users need? That's part of it. In addition to listening to stakeholders, asking good questions, writing copy, hey, that's part of it. It's a smaller part of it than you might expect. Soliciting feedback on your copy, iterating, revising, testing, all of these things. Beyond that, when you get kind of into the nitty gritty, I don't want to say nitty gritty. I found out recently that is a racist term, and I'm sorry that came out of my mouth. But when you get down really into the day-to-day, the stickiness of that, there's also a lot of, because UX writing is a relatively new thing, educating team members and stakeholders on what UX writing is and how or when to involve UX writing. That's a part of it. It's just there. Unless you find yourself in a role where UX writing is really an established, baked in, built in part of the process, that's going to be an aspect of that, which means you will probably get requests. Can you check this copy really quick? And it's just always this moment of like, no, it doesn't happen. There's no really quick, There's also a lot of reading, listening, exploring, working with designers, and researchers, and then getting coffee, building alliances with developers and product owners, and making sure that you have a good rapport with these people who, especially when you really get into projects, when you really get into the accessible side of UX writing, having those alliances really pays off, right? Let's see. Before I go to skills, I'm going to take another look at the Q&A, see what we have here. Give me a second. Okay, if I don't read out your question now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to get to it. It just means it's not relevant at the moment, and I'm going to try to get to it. So, how varied does your job feel day to day? Are you just writing UX copy or doing more than that? Isabella, always more. It's always, I'm never bored. I am never bored. That's one thing I can say is that it's one day I'm looking at I went through a lot of user interviews and stuff today at work. If the next day I'll be looking at some design flows in Figma and putting accessibility annotations in for our designers and developers. Another day I'll be kind of like writing a conversation sketch because like we have a complicated problem to solve. And it's like, how would this work if we were actually talking to a customer, like at a counter? Like, how would this work? So it's varied. It's quite varied. That's one of the things I really love about it. So very cool. I might be missing some questions, but Matthew, you asked about topography. I think it matters to the extent, for me, it matters to the extent as I'm like push back on any copy, any fonts and things like this, topography that isn't fully accessible. So you want to go sans serif most of the time. But beyond that, I would say that's more of a UI direction, which you could definitely develop as a specialization as a UX writer. So, do I feel UX writing gets undervalued in most companies? Most companies, I don't know. I know it does get undervalued. I know there's a very common sort of this idea that everyone is a writer. And in a way, yes, everyone's a writer. And that does not mean that it is not a specialized skill set. So, yeah, no. Okay, I'm going to move on. I don't see other ones. Maria, your question in there, I am going to come back to this just so you're aware I'm not forgetting you. All right, so take a look here. This is a non-exhaustive list, okay? This is like off the top of my head. Here are the things that I see as the core skills for UX writers. I'm going to give you a second to look at this, and I will read through slowly. Don't want to overwhelm anyone. UX and design thinking, unsurprisingly, that's part of it. User research and writing, unsurprisingly, that's part of it. Content strategy, communication. Patience and diplomacy, that's a thing, is working on that. Curiosity and really knowing how to ask good questions. That is one thing that I spend way more time doing than what I expected, is following things up and just asking tons of questions like, okay, I see this flow, but like, what happens if they click here instead? Or what happens if they need to do this while this is going on? Or asking a lot of these questions. There's a CTA, where is this actually taking them? Because this doesn't seem right, or whatever it might be. Agility, flexibility. In this, I'm talking about like, yeah, having a flexible sort of way of working because things change quite frequently, can change. But I'm also talking about agile ways of working, which is a thing in a lot, if not most tech companies, which is mostly where UX writers get hired. And so it's worth exploring agile ways of working and understanding that framework. So it'll be a little less jarring if you find yourself in that kind of a setting. Empathy, 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 and not just for your users. That is important, very important, but also empathy for other stakeholders that you have, for your designers, your developers, your product owners, project managers, everybody you're collaborating with. Having empathy for like, what is the problem that you're facing here? How can I help? Will take you a long way. Inclusive language and accessibility practices. I think these are often tagged on as kind of extras, like, oh, you can specialize in this. No, this is part of it. If your copy is not accessible, if it is not inclusive, it is not complete copy, right? So that is part of the skill set. And the bonus, I would say, if you can develop a specialized skill set in some parallel discipline, research, design, coding, something like this, that will take you a long way. It's really important. So there's that. I'm going to check for questions again to make sure we're staying on top of it. The best books for UX writing. There will be some in this tracker sheet that I send you. Some. There's also a really good article in the CareerFoundry blog that I know is there. So check out the CareerFoundry blog. Is there a difference between a UX writer and a content designer? Anissa, I don't know how to answer that question. There are differences, yes. And as you're job hunting, I have seen these titles used interchangeably. So I would say check out the job descriptions for the jobs that you're applying for, and this will help you find it, because I've seen a lot of places are moving more towards calling UX writers content designers, and others are moving back from content designer to UX writer. I know people who have switched careers from content designers because they liked UX writing better. In my mind, it's all, you're working with the same stuff. Content designers, I think it's not strictly within the product development realm. It can be a little bit broader than that. But yeah. Mayuri, you asked about where's the tracker sheet. We're going to get to that. I'll drop a link in, don't worry. I promise I'm going to share it with you. Can I become a UX writer with a background in content writing and UI design? Do I need another course for it? There's another one about this, about do I need to take a course for it? Let's get to that. We're going to answer these in the next step of our talk here. Now, let me see 1 second. Okay. Don't forget to drop questions in the QA and to vote for ones that you're interested in, because if we don't get to some at the end, we'll prioritize the ones that have more upvotes. So be keeping an eye on that. Matthew is seeing a lot of postings for content creators, thoughts of applying for such positions and then convincing them they need to hire a UX writer or content designer instead. What are my thoughts on that? If you want to risk it, sure, and I think too, it depends on what you're interested in, where you're at right now in terms of developing a profile that's very fit for a UX writing role, applying directly for one. It might be that you're super passionate about the company itself, and that's important to you, and that could be a way in. I mean, you can do this. I would say I could see some definite challenges to being the first UX writer in a company. Like it's probably going to tick up the need to educate people and do those things, and probably doing a lot more than what a UX writing job would be. It's going to kind of add to that. So it probably wouldn't be my first choice unless you really love the company. So, yeah. All right. Checking other questions. All right. Wait, let me check here. One more. So I've heard about this from Melissa. So I've heard about the different levels of maturity in terms of companies understanding the value of UX design and writing. What is the average level of maturity in your current market? It varies so much, Melissa. It varies from company to company, like vastly. It's very interesting. And even within companies, it can vary. Like I work at HelloFresh and love my job, love the people I work with directly. Some people understand UX writing better than others. And so collaborations, some are just better and more fruitful than others. And that's just kind of part of it. Yeah. All right. Mayari, you asked about ageism. Can you drop that one in the Q&A, in the Q&A tab? Because I think that I don't want to forget it. And a better chance of me not forgetting it if it's in the Q&A tab. I'll drop it there. Interesting. Sid says that, Sid, I don't know your pronouns, so I'm just going to use they, them ones, that they enjoy being the first. And you were first through a lot of your career. That's interesting. Okay. So if you really enjoy learning things from scratch and taking that scrappier approach, I think that can be great. So yeah, this is good. Okay. Now, let's skip ahead. So we're going to take things just one thing at a time. So the list you made a few minutes ago of your jobs, I want you to, if you have that still, if you actually wrote it down, like pull that out or just think about these jobs that you've had as we're going through this. So your first step is to understand the core UX writing skills, okay, which we've just looked at. And I'm gonna send you drop in a link in just a minute because I don't want people to get distracted too much while we're in here. This inventory skills tracker, so you can dig in. And I'll show you also how you can use it. So yeah, but understanding the core UX writing skill set and then taking a look at your own skills. So this is where I would just take a moment. I'm going to stop talking and take a sip of tea and think about these past jobs that you have worked. I'm going to put the core skills back on the screen and I want you to just mark down or just jot down a few notes, things that stand out. Which of these skills, how many of these skills did you already kind of practice and kind of already start developing when you were working as a barista, as a customer a call center representative, or any of these other jobs that you've had? Okay, so take just a minute. I'm going to go quietly, look at some questions, and let you all think about that. Jot down some notes. If you feel like dropping any observations in the chat, feel free, but no pressure. Okay, I won't leave the awkward silence too long, but has anybody noticed how many, do you have some skills? Do you already have some of these skills? Chances are good, right? Because you're a human being who interacts with other human beings. Yeah, backstage. Okay, so Emily worked backstage in the theater before and used so many of these skills. This is exactly right. So if you're looking at a career change, really important to remember that your transferable skills count. The time you spent developing these skills counts, okay? It counts. Do not undersell yourself going into an interview process. Not like, I don't have any experience, but I did these other things. No, you have the experience. You have the experience. Don't undersell yourself when you're deciding which roles to apply for. A lot of people back away from roles that ask for a certain number of years of experience. And like, if they're asking for like 10 years of experience, maybe don't apply because they probably don't know what they're looking for, or they're looking for like a lead or something like that. But those sorts of things, it's not going to be the deal breaker for an application package. If it is, may not be the kind of company you want to work for in the first place. So yeah. Eric says that as a product manager and former graphic web designer, I feel like I see a lot of overlap within these fields, and I expect that to be true with UX. Yes, absolutely. There's overlap everywhere. And so, yeah, it's one of the really beautiful things is that all of these disciplines, they kind of cross-pollinate as well, especially when there's these fruitful collaborations and such. So yeah. Now, going back to this, so you can see your own skill set and kind of where you might measure up. You can give that more thought as you dig further into it. But identify, where is the knowledge gap? Where's the experience gap? That's your growing edge. That's where you want to focus your skills development and experience development. That's where you want to focus. And then you create your learning roadmap. You start gathering resources and you take those first steps. Okay. For some of you, that's going to mean a course. There were some questions about this. For some of you, that's going to mean a course. Some of you, that's going to mean like finding something about UX design because you need to understand that better. You already do the writing bit and you need to. I did a UX design certification and then I did a UX writing certification because I wanted to kind of dig further into it and really do the deep dive. And then I did one in accessibility in UX. And so it's really just dependent on which of those skills do you have. Most of the time, if you're making a big career change, you have the soft skills or like you have a good grasp on them anyway. And it's those more technical ones that you're going to want to work out and develop a portfolio around, all of those things. So, and I cannot recommend this highly enough. Finding a mentor is really important. Finding somebody who is ahead of you on that journey and can provide resources, answer questions, be there if you need to vent about like, I just did my 200th job application and nothing's happening, things like this, like, cause it can happen. It doesn't always happen. It happened for me. It took me 200 some, and it was just like, okay, finally landed the role. And so, yeah, finding somebody who can be there to answer questions and support. So, all right, now, not yet. Okay, I'm going to do what I promised I would do, and I'm going to show you first the skills tracker so I can describe to you how it's going to work. I have to remember how to share my screen. There it is. All right. I see questions popping in. I'm going to get to you, but let me pop over here. All right, so as I said, this is an Airtable. If you have never used Airtable, I have the biggest crush on this tool. I love it. It's amazing. I love it. So I took a tracker that I used for my own sort of learning and development that I've used for the past 5 years now and adapted it. Joelle is giving the Airtable love. Yep, you understand. So I adapted it to this and did it so I put in the skills here that we talked about, core UX writing skill sets. When I share the link to this, you can go in and edit as you like. So you can go in right here. You can add more skills if you want to, more sections to this. But within each of these sections, you open it up. You can, if you're a due date oriented person, you can do that. You can, okay, what level of mastery do I have this? Do I need a refresher? Is this kind of my growing edge? I need to kind of get there. Do I need a really deep dive? Or do I just kind of like, I have it, I want to maintain it, that sort of a thing. And then I've got some resources that I've put in for each of these. And then if you're a task-oriented person, you can go into these things that I put in as they're connected to the resources that I linked. And you can add subtasks if you want to. You can put in how confident are you feeling that you got this thing, any other notes, resources, anything else you want to do. I also have past the tasks in these. I have notes and reflections. So if you want to kind of like, okay, the UX thing, I'm kind of getting it, I'm nervous about it, whatever you want to put in there, you can kind of track that. And I have found this really useful as I've been digging into things that really helped me to kind of define where I wanted to focus my learning and development time. I realized like accessibility and inclusion, like this is my jam. I realized all my notes were always like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I was so enthusiastic about it that I thought, okay, it's eventually I'm going to need a really deep dive in that and to really explore that. So this is how this is built out. If you don't like the skills overview, you can go to the task view, which is in there. And you just kind of make it your own, delete stuff, move things around. So when I share it with you, you'll be able to copy the base. So you can't break the one that I send you. Okay. Now let me stop sharing my screen. So it's right there. It says stop sharing. Some good UX writing right there. Let me grab this link really quick. Publicly click to copy. Airtable also has really good UX writing, just saying. So here it is. Whoops. There we go. Take it, use it, do your thing. Okay. Back to the slides. That was an information dump, I'm realizing. So questions, thoughts, existential crises. What you got going on over there? I'm going to check the QA. I saw a little red dot. So how do you find a mentor? So you can go to a program like CareerFoundry. They have great mentors. You can also go to, there are places like the Mentoring Club. I remember, why am I forgetting? There's the big one. Y'all, I still have surgery brain. I'm still recovering after medical leave. And it's like, some things are not working. Somebody in this room probably knows what it is. It's an acronym and I can't remember. And if I remember, I will try and share it with you before tonight is over. But there are places where you can go either for free. People will volunteer their time. You can also go, and there are places that do just for a small fee. So you're paying them for their time, and that's kind of a nice even exchange for the benefit that you're getting out of it. Another way you can do it is like, who do you follow on LinkedIn? Who are you? And I don't often recommend like just messaging randos, but on LinkedIn, sometimes that really pays off. And you can even just be upfront and say, like, I'm trying to break into this field. Do you have capacity to like mentor me? Your content is amazing, or whatever it is, and asking for that can be helpful. All right, let me see here. Okay, the Q&A, let me just scroll up here and make sure. Patricia, for accessibility courses and other things, like at the beginning of my career change, at the beginning, I was Googling stuff and exploring things left and right, just whatever I could find for free. And that will take you a long way. There's a lot of really good content out there. And then I have other resources in the inventory skills tracker. There's a section there for accessibility practices. There's a separate one for inclusive stuff. So you can go into both of those, and there will be some resources. UX writer, we'll get to this. Eileen, what are the KPIs of UX writing? Depends on the company. Depends on the company. And depends on what their priorities are. There are ways that you can measure how copy is performing, but even that really varies from one company to the next. So that's something to kind of explore as you go. A lot of times it'll be something like conversion rate, or how much uptake there is on a certain feature, or it really can vary. So let's see. Kara, I hope I'm saying your name right, asks, I'm enrolled in the data analytics course. Yay, you. I almost took the data analytics course with CareerFoundry because I thought it looked really interesting. So that's what I think I'll be doing. UX is great, which is why I'm here to learn more. Now, what are some fields where data analysts work more closely with UX writers? Accessibility is really important to me. I would say, especially because a lot of accessibility in UX writing happens, or some of it happens behind the screens. It's not just what's on the screen, right? It's within the code. It's within these other things. How much can I share? I also have to be careful because under contract, and like, I don't want to share too much, but like there are other things you can help with internally if you're working with internal tools and data like this. There are things that you can do internally. I've had conversations with data analysts and other data-oriented fields about internal information architecture and data models and things like this. And so So I would say there's definitely crossover. It's not, I don't think typically the first thing out the gate that you'd be involved in. But if your primary interest is in data analytics and you have an interest in UX or UX writing, I would say that these are definitely compatible things and can be helpful to people that you work with in the future. So, okay, how are we on time? Oh, I'm doing so good. Okay. Usually I'm like, answer questions at the end. But we're not done yet. So I'm going to move forward. If I have missed questions in the chat and I feel like somebody, I saw it. Hannah, Isabel, ADP list. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Antonia, y'all got it. Thank you. You just saved my brain from waking up at 3 o'clock this morning, like ADP list. So ADP list is the other place where you can find a mentor. So yeah. Okay. Now, next up is landing the job. Are we ready to jump to this? Are there other questions before we get to like that? Anissa, you're asking about interviews, and we will talk about that in just a second. So Anissa, you might drop that in the Q&A tab because I don't want to lose it. So extract that. Eric asked, do you typically validate UX writing via A/B testing to isolate the change and measure it more directly? This can be done. It's not done as frequently, at least not in like the work that I've done. It's not done as frequently as I maybe expected at the beginning, because at the beginning I thought it's all about that specific word choice and it's all no, it's not just that. That does matter. And it's the entire flow and how is this all working on the whole? What is the texture, the shape of the conversation? But A/B testing can definitely be a way to measure that, especially if you have something like a particular feature that you're rolling out and there's a very clear measurable, like a CTA at the end, and it's just like, okay, that worked. A/B testing works a lot better for that kind of a clear measurable. So yeah. See if I don't want to miss other. Oh my gosh, everybody, Matthew, look, everybody's got ADP lists. Thank you. So funny. Surgery brain. Hadia, I hope I'm saying your name right, asks, can you give a roadmap for how to start learning? So there's one thing that I am very proud of, and this has been true for like most of my life, is that I don't stop the learning thing, This tracker is something that I've developed over years of like trying to map things out. And I think the best way I can recommend mapping out your learning process, because learning is also a very individual thing. And what's going to work for you is like what's going to work for me isn't necessarily what's going to work best for you. And so I would say it really starts with looking at what is the knowledge gap, what is the experience gap, identify how can I close that. So it's starting with an inventory of your skill set and your experience, identifying the gap, and then looking at how can I actually go about, then what are the practical steps to closing that gap. Start first with the technical skills, because typically those are the ones that need more change, need more development. Do not neglect the soft skills, okay? They will serve you. Get feedback from people about these soft skills and understand where you can develop. That takes a lot of humility sometimes, checking your ego at the door and just being, because you're asking, how am I imperfect? Okay. And yeah, so I would start with that. And then I would move into just ticking the things off and keeping track of like, how are you feeling with this, and pacing things in a way that works for how you learn. Okay, and you also ask the best way to learn Figma. I believe that CareerFoundry at least used to. I haven't checked in recently. Laura, maybe you can tell us if there are still Figma tutorials and such that CareerFoundry is doing, which are very useful. So yeah, if that's happening. Otherwise, YouTube is awesome. That's my go-to. So Figma itself also has a lot of good resources on how to learn Figma. So there's that. Perfect. Rebecca recommends the Google search for Figma. So there's that. And Laura says, yes, there's still live Figma tutorials taking place every month. Y'all, I really highly recommend these. I'm so glad y'all are still doing them. That's great. It's perfect. Okay. Now time is it? Let me skip forward here. So we had questions about portfolios and interviews. These could be 2 separate webinars on their own. So we're not going to get the kind of depth that you probably want out of this, okay? But we're going to get some. Let me just, sorry, my screen is lagging. Here we are. All right, so don't underestimate the power of a strong portfolio. And that's especially true and even true if you're just starting out. It can be difficult to generate a portfolio. There's these 2 links here. These are also in the inventory tracker sheet. If you go to the portfolio section that I included, you need a portfolio. It does not have to be real world experience. What is that anyway? You can do practice projects. You can do UX writing challenges. You can do things that kind of build a portfolio. Certification programs. I know the one at CareerFoundry the best. With the UX design certification program, you're working through with a lot of rigor. There's like a lot of information there you'll work through, and there's a lot of practical projects. Every single bit of that, or almost every single bit of that, can go into your portfolio. And just because it's UX design, oh, guess what? That can include UX writing. So these are not separate, okay? There are other UX design type trainings and courses that you can do. And as you do that, you can gather experience, you can gather artifacts for your portfolio. And there are a lot of tips and tricks out there to how you should develop a portfolio, demonstrating results, demonstrating process. Don't just show the results, things like this. But as I said, there's resources in the tracker, and there's a lot more out there too. From what I have seen in UX writing portfolios, there's a lot of crossover. UX writing and UX design portfolios. If you find stuff on UX design portfolios, there's a lot of crossover there with UX writing ones. So you can start there. Recommendation for job search experience. I've already said this, but apply for any role that matches your skill set. It might not match your exact profile. Years of experience required. This is, I would say to watch out for additional skills like coding, translation, things like this, partly because you want to make sure it matches your skill set, but also because it can tell you a lot about how much a company understands about what they're actually hiring for. And I know people who have been hired into companies that did not understand what they were asking for, and they get there and they're like, UX writer. And it's like, what are we doing? Okay. So being aware of that and asking a lot of questions during the interview process about how their design process works. Where does UX writing factor into that process? Things like this. In the interview process, do not undersell yourself. As I said before, transferable skills really, really matter. The typical interview process, I say typical, this has just been from my experience. There's going to be probably an HR screening, lasts anywhere from 10 to 60 minutes. I've had them across the spectrum. So a UX writing challenge, or a practical sort of exercise where you're actually doing some UX writing for the company. This can also be a really good chance to see what they think matters in a UX writer. It's very interesting to see what some companies go with. It's very interesting. There will probably be a round with a team lead or team members. Sometimes that's combined with a review of your UX writing challenge where you talk about that and get feedback. And then sometimes there's an executive or C-level where it's kind of this last check company fit that can be very nerve-wracking, but it's also like, okay. My hot tip, the best interviews that I have had were ones that I went into and I interviewed as though I did not need the job, even if I did. I went into it like, I can take or leave this. I am assessing whether this company is a good fit for me. One of the interviews, I couldn't believe it when it came out of my mouth, because it's like, who does this? They asked me, they always ask this, right? They were like, so why do you want to work at XYZ company? And I said, well, I don't know if I do. Can you tell me why I should? You know? And it was like, they stopped and they were like, well, you know, I think the reason that those interviews go better is I think it builds more trust, because they know they can rely more on the fact that I'm not just saying things because I want to get their approval. I'm not just trying to sell myself. I'm being honest, and I'm being very clear. Like, I don't know if this company is going to be a good fit for me, and approaching it in that way, in that very transparent, frank, maybe a little cocky, just like, I don't need this, but I'm interested. Let's talk. Can be very helpful. So that's one of my biggest tips. Don't forget that you are also interviewing them. I'll offer another thing. I think that keeping track of interviews, stages and such, when you apply for something, have an interview, one stage in the process, take notes after that. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What does your gut tell you? Paying attention to those things. This matters. Keep track of that, because if it comes time to make a decision, maybe between two or more roles, you want to go back and you want to weigh things, and you want a clear idea of, like, in the moment, what did my gut tell me there? Last little tip that I'm going to give before I go to questions is always negotiate salary, and especially if you are disabled, if you are a woman, if you are queer, if you are a person of color, if you are from an underrepresented, typically marginalized community, negotiate your salary, okay? People within these groups tend to not negotiate salary because we're supposed to just be happy with whatever we get. And I'm sorry, I'm going to use a little language here. That's bull. Don't do it, okay? Don't do it. Negotiate salary, ask for more than you think you're worth. Okay, remember, we live in a capitalist economy. It's a capitalist world. You are exchanging your time and energy, which is a precious, precious resource. You're exchanging your time and energy for money. And most of the time, their first offer is not their best. So there's that. The other thing that's really impacted me, after I learned or thought about this, I thought, okay, no, I can't ever not negotiate salary now, because it impacts your earning potential for the rest of your career, because raises in that company are going to be a percentage of your base salary. The next role, if you're disclosing like previous salary, anything like this, like it's going to be based off these things, and so paying attention to those things early on can make a big difference. Okay, I'm stopping there. I'm going to check questions. Right. Can bring it. Okay, actually, then I might ask Laura to step in and tell me if there are questions that you would like to prioritize in these last few minutes. I know many of you might need to leave. I have a few extra minutes beyond like the next 3 to 5. So if there's more time, I'm happy to stay. So,
thank you, Emerson. I think first of all, great interaction from the public. I can barely keep track of all the questions coming in. Okay, so let me sneak in a couple LinkedIn questions, because we didn't give LinkedIn too much attention this time. So we have 2 questions from Sonali. They're different. So first one is, can we do UX writing with the help of AI tools, and how?
I would say yes, because if you're following information on social media and stuff about the AI developments here, there are problems. There are problems with it. For me, it's like, I think they're pretty big problems, because you're talking about intellectual property. You're talking about things that, like, for me, is like, with an academic background too, I'm just like, I would say you can use it. It all depends on context. Okay. You can use it, but I would say it should never be without going back with the human eye. It should never be without going back with that expertise that you have. So it can help you in your job. And specific ways I'm not going to respond to, because I think it's just so much depends on context, and different companies have different policies on this. But I think, using it to support you in your role, not to do your role, is the goal, because truly it's a tool for the discipline, not a replacement of. So I think that's important to remember. Yeah.
Great answer. And the second question from Sonali is, how does accessibility practice help improve UX writing? Could you explain?
That was an entire webinar last week that I don't know if the recording will be released. And I'm hoping these will happen again. And so I could go way into that, but how do I? Give me a second. Brain is ticking. How does it improve UX writing? Good UX writing is accessible UX writing, period. When you have copy on the screen that's kind of gobbled up with special characters and backslashes and things like this, A, it's not pretty to look at. B, it doesn't work well for assistive tech. And so in like a very simple example, that's one way we're just cleaning it up, where what's on the screen can easily be read out by a screen reader. That alone is accessibility and UX working very well together. The other thing about accessibility and UX writing is typically, not just with UX writing, I would say in all content creation, all content design, typically with design systems, with SEO type rules, the Google gods, like things that the Google gods want typically work well for accessibility. Those work hand in hand. So that's also true. Yeah. I think it's seen as a special add-on thing when it's like, no, it's actually really just part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely true. It should be a part of it. And like Emerson said, we had a great accessibility webinar not too long ago. Hopefully we'll do it again. So stay tuned for that. We have a couple more questions. I'll do 3 more questions because I want to be mindful of time. Let me know if you've already answered this, because we had so many questions coming in the Q&A chat in the last few minutes. But basically, first off, Isabella asks, can UX research and UX design assets count within my portfolio for UX writing? She did a design bootcamp. Or will that only count as bonus experience and not really be counted as UX writing work?
I think a lot of it depends on how you display it in the portfolio. Because UX writing is a different process in UX research. It is a different process in UX design. And so I think if you want to apply for a UX writing role, you want at least one case study that's built out following, like, what is your UX writing process, specifically, and detailing that, giving those kinds of outcomes. Yeah, I would say it can be in there. It's likely to be seen as just kind of like, oh, cool, they could do that if we needed them to. If it's not built out as like, this is a UX writing project,
So diving in a little deeper into how she went through the writing process, basically.
Yeah, exactly. What were the steps to like finding out what users needed, user research of it? What were the steps to finding out like what kind of language might actually work for them? Conversation mining. What were the steps to actually making those decisions and trying it out? Copy testing, things like this.
Okay. Yeah. It's a good one. Now, Matthew asks, I'm seeing a lot of postings for content creators. What are your thoughts about applying for such positions and then convincing them they need to hire a UX writer / content designer instead?
This one we answered. Before. So the recording, if I'm not mistaken, will be sent out afterwards. And if you need to catch that one again, it's in there.
Okay, perfect. Maria asks, how hard is it to find entry-level UX writing jobs without having a solid experience in UX design or UX research as well?
I think that's going to depend on how you sell your transferable skills, especially at entry level. Entry level, I would think of as like a junior or intern level role, maybe mid-level, depending on how you sell it, right? But if you don't have any experience in UX research, get some. At least in taking in some user research and utilizing it for your writing, because that's part of the whole thing. So, yeah.
Okay. We have another really good question, especially for those currently transitioning and becoming UX writers. The question is, can you provide insights into the most common challenges faced by new UX writers and any advice on how to overcome this?
Okay, so on a larger scale, it's educating people like, hi, this is what my job actually is, and I am not just a copywriter. because it's different. I feel likely to be an ongoing thing unless you're in a company, like I said, where it's like really baked in and it's like you have a big team of like really involved UX writers. The other thing I think is learning the soft skills involved in communicating with, negotiating with, really figuring out how to talk to your audience, whether it's a product owner, whether it's a designer, whether it's really finding a way to match your communication to the person and the role and the priorities that you're talking to. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think it's especially in the field. There's a UX writer memes. If you don't follow this account on Instagram, do it. It's great. Fantastic and hilarious content. And it also kind of a quippy, snippy take on some of the challenges for UX writers. Product owners and project managers come up way more often than you might think because their priorities are different than yours. You're working towards the same goal, but their priorities are different than yours. And so there's sometimes things get lost in translation there. So, yeah.
I lied because I'm going to do one more question because it's tied to that one. And I think it's a great question. The question is, how can UX writers collaborate effectively with designers and developers and, like you said, product managers to ensure a seamless user experience?
It depends on the individuals. Part of it depends on that. I think one of the things that's helped me the most, because I would notice, especially early on, I would notice these moments of tension in Slack. You know, remote work is a thing, and Slack is a breeding ground for misunderstanding. So remembering that, but going into conversations and knowing like, okay, I'm talking to a human being who has a job to do, who has things that are stressing them out, and asking them questions like, how can I help? What are your priorities here? And approaching them as a human being, one human to another. What's going on here and what can I do? You know, that will take you really, really far, because then they're far more likely to be interested in what your priorities are and helping you out if they feel like they're being met and not like collided with. And so I think slowing down and empathizing with them is the big thing. Yeah.
It's a good tip. I think especially in UX, I think a lot of times people transitioning, they focus so much on the hard skills, which are very important, but the soft skills are such a huge part of the job that you could be the best at the technical skills, but if you don't manage this, then it's going to be really difficult. But
do check out with the inventory tracker there, the sections on empathy and communication. There's some good resources that I popped in there as well. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Emerson, for answering all of the questions. I'm so sad we couldn't get to all of them, but we'll have the webinar again, so definitely stay tuned for that. Before we close the webinar, I'd just like to remind you all of a special discount that we're offering this month, a tuition reduction worth up to $1,370 or 1,195 euros off the full price for UX and UI design programs. If you'd like to receive more information, just book a call with one of our program advisors by simply clicking on the sticky note at the top of the chat. We also have a fantastic blog at CareerFoundry, as Emerson already mentioned, run by our team of editors with plenty of great articles about UX design, UX writing, and many more topics. Please also check out our amazing YouTube channel with a lot of great video content. And finally, please visit our events page to keep an eye out for our next UX writing event with Emerson. Any final words you'd like to give before we wrap up?
I think just thank you. And yeah, go into it with a lot of curiosity because it's really fun. It's really a fun field to explore. So yeah.
Cool. Amazing. Well, once again, a big thanks to Emerson for being with us today, for putting together this amazing presentation, shared so many resources. We really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for all the questions to everyone who joined. We really, really love that as well. And hope that you have all enjoyed it so much, feel inspired to pursue a career in the field, and have a great day. We'll see you next time and looking forward to our next one. Have a wonderful day, Emerson, and hope your cat had a really good nap as well. Didn't make an appearance, maybe next time. Cool. Have a wonderful night, everyone.